welcome back for a deep dive into one of the featured lore books in the season of Reclamation. Today, we'll be discussing the first 4 pages contained in the book as without, and theorize about some of the details discussed within, as well as the data corruption and possible clues to a mystery. This book covers 3 different perspectives: that of Eris Morn, Honor of the Praxic Order, and, finally, for the first time ever, we're granted a first-person perspective of the inner thoughts from Drifter's ghost. Sadly, no, we still don't get their name. While obtaining these pages were a part of last season's questline, I still want to provide a bit of a spoiler warning block, as I know they were a bit time-consuming to complete. There will be no discussion here of the new pages presented in Ash and Iron, as they will be in their own video. So this spoiler warning 100% only pertains to last season. It's completely understandable that even an active player may not have all these pages yet. Even I had to dedicate a block of time to just chasing them down. But they clearly are setting this book up as a central focus, so I thought it'd be good to discuss its contents in detail. With that bit of stalling for spoiler warnings behind us now, let's get our hands dirty. We'll be discussing some erratic new behavior between the Vex and Taken, stalk an upstart group of weapon merchants on Mars, and the final page offers reflections on some emotional tensions behind a particular curtain. And while we're at it, we'll put our tinfoil hats on and tear into some possible hidden messages amongst the corrupted data. Ready? Let's get into it. The hidden embrace their conatus in analyzing the nature of the chronospatial distortions on Earth. They cross-reference samples, interview witnesses, and create elaborate computational models. I will leave them to it. The question that interests me is not how, but why. My inquiry must begin with the Taken. Chronospatial distortions are, by nature, harbingers of unintended consequences. I must know whether destroying the echo of navigation unleashed a latent power within the Taken, or whether these distortions arise from another influence. I have been observing newly independent Taken near Europa's Golden Age ruins. They appear in causally independent patterns rather than their telltale clusters. They traverse to and from the ascendant plane at seemingly random intervals. Nothing in their behavior suggests a linkage to the time distortions we've seen elsewhere. Save for one thing. Hidden agents report a curious finding on Europa. Vex are luring stray Taken into fortified areas for capture. As an entomologist might trap insects. The behavior is consistent with an empirical sampling effort, rather than the usual territorial squabbles. My investigative efforts on Europa have yielded positive results. I have managed to secure a live Vex Minotaur at the cost of a chipped tooth, much to my irritation. I am eager to test my many hypotheses on a live subject. A mixed result. I was able to download a plurality of data from the captured Minotaur's frame, completing my prime objective. However, my security measures were partially insufficient, allowing the Vex to trigger its self-destruct sequence. The smell of scorched radiolaria still befouls my ship's upholstery. The data downloaded from the captured Minotaur is fascinating. In addition to the standard protocols, it contained a prodigious amount of data that can only be described as irrational, as if it transcribed information from language it could not understand. It's times like these that I miss Bria's expertise. The presence of the irrational data within the captured Minotaur leads me to conclude this Vex frame was not of a collective previously documented on Europa, but rather a member of the Nessian Schism. It seems Maya's research is taking her further afield. The irrational data I recovered from Maya's captured Vex is wreaking havoc on my ship's systems. Its effect on my firewalls indicate that it is not a malware of any known variety, or, indeed, anything of technological origin. Rather, the incursion seems to be a glitch within my local time-space continuum. I have been able to contain the glitch infecting my ship with a hive spell derived from Heraktha's brood. However, substantial damage has been done. Several key components show signs of advanced decay, enduring years' worth of untreated oxidization within minutes. Meanwhile, other components de-age to factory fresh condition. The damage done to my ship's systems by the time glitch is extensive, but instructive. It further validates a burgeoning hypothesis. The Vex are researching a power beyond paracausality, the ability to manipulate time itself. If so, the Vex are merely fomites rather than the origins of the disruption. Our first two pages follow Eris in her studies on Europa. The Taken have caught her interest, but that only leads her to the Vex. We'll start with a quick definition of conatus, a term coined by Spinoza to denote the natural inclination of a thing to continue to exist in a way that perpetuates its existence. More abstract, but perhaps easier to understand, think of a basic creature. It will pursue and create an environment that is comfortable with easy food in order that it may continue to live and eventually propagate. In our case, Eris is using it to describe the hidden and those that make up its agents. They are specifically chosen for their veracity to their job. The hidden code of dictates specifies, in summary, that agents must first know themselves in order to destroy themselves, so that they may become the faceless many. As a result, during the rare glimpses of hidden activity, we tend to see them operating as a collective would break apart problems to their more efficient pieces, seeking to understand it so that they may break its threat. Eris's intention with offering the term is to distance herself from their pursuits and more properly define what it is that she's looking for. However, she doesn't view their work as lesser, rather a different step in solving the same puzzle. Instead of asking with what mechanisms the enemy is using to carry out their actions, Eris is more concerned with what it is that motivates them. She notes that the Taken have begun acting, apparently, independently instead of their typical formulaic patrol groups. They've begun appearing randomly, acting erratically. Following up on a lead that the Vex are abducting Taken for empirical study, Eris decides to do the same with a Minotaur. Ever the badass, she takes it herself, coming out with only a chipped tooth, and even irritated at that. No slouch, Eris is sure to take precautions against the normal Vex incursion and corruption tactics, setting up failsafes through her ship's systems. Unfortunately, as we'll see, this situation is quite unprecedented. As Eris is attempting to download its memory data, her protections fail and the Vex manages to self-destruct. Her ship survives the blast physically, but the smell of burnt radiolaria hangs in the air. And that is just the beginning of the ship's problems. Sifting through the downloaded data, Eris discovers a large swath of data that the Vex had simply earmarked as irrational. Given that the Vex are the living embodiment of logical structures, Eris surmises that this must have been interpreted as something similar to copying algorithms from an engineering textbook when you don't understand basic numbers. Continuing in her studies, she realizes that the data has begun corrupting her ship. Not digitally, but there are actual temporal poison spots, rendering bits of her ship age to degradation, while others appear as they did first floating off the factory floor. She manages to contain the corruption with a spell she derived from her experiences with a particular hive brood. Classic Eris, am I right? As dismayed as she is about her ship, it seems secondary to the conclusion she's able to deduce from the corruption. If the irrational data is a study of manipulating time itself, then the Vex themselves are likely not the source of the motivation. They are simply the tool. Drifter's locks, perpetually concealed behind that greasy headband, have gone a sterling gray. The aging of light bearers has been the subject of much pontification within the cryptarchy, even more so regarding former light bearers like myself. But this is the first case of spontaneous aging in the known record. Leave it to Drifter. I am now confident in concluding that the Vex are merely a vector for the time distortions we've witnessed. My sapient intuition is that the cause will be found beyond the meager confines of our 3 dimensions. Tangentially, my ship's internal clock now counts using a ternary system, rendering it all but useless. Not wanting to risk another acute thermal event aboard my ship, I chose instead to garner assistance from a Vex expert. Upon my arrival on Nessus, it was not Osiris who answered my call, but Failsafe. Apparently, she recognized my ship's identification and immediately sent an invitation for tea. It will be a while before Failsafe finishes her analyses of captured Vex remnants. She has generously provided a list of non-poisonous local plant life and their locations. I hope to pioneer a new blend of Nessian tea while I wait. Failsafe has finished her work. The most notable result was not digital, but physical in nature. Carbon dating confirms that multiple components of the Vex frame are different ages, though they were manufactured at the same time. It seems this Vex suffered similar temporal distortions to those that ravaged my ship and Drifter. My custom blend of Nessian tea is palatable, and liberal use brings on a pleasant numbness around the lips, tongue, and nose. I think Drifter will be delighted by such a culinary oddity. I have vacuum sealed a generous quantity for our reunion. Dedicated observation of the Nessian schism leads me to believe that Maya's control over the echo of command has begun to dwindle. I witnessed several groups of Vex roaming in loose bands, seemingly without patrol routes. I saw one goblin sit on the ground and watch an insect with childlike interest for some time. I discovered a group of coral Vex frames devoid of life, warped and twisted, driven into the ground like corpse daffodils in early spring. They were drained of radiolaria, perhaps in a punitive measure. If the conductor is forced to mete out such draconian punishment, then her hold over the collective must truly be imperiled. The Neomunians have reported a theft of Golden Age data similar to the incursions documented by hidden agents throughout the inner system. Though a Byzantine system of cutouts made it impossible to pinpoint the source, the modus operandi points to Maya Sundaresh and the Coral Vex. Maya's system-wide pursuit of Golden Age technology, while effective on its face, belies an underlying desperation. It calls to mind a scientist frantically changing the conditions of their experiment to elicit the hypothesized results. Whatever stratagem Maya used to overextend herself, whatever Faustian bargain she made, has clearly left her weakened. Failsafe's final scans on the Minotaur remains show micro-clustering of unknown subatomic particles in conjunction with trace exposure to K-alpha iron emissions. She stated that while the material was too lossy for reconstruction, even after p-hacking the data, we can deduce the subject was exposed to large quantities of dark matter. After much cajoling, Drifter agreed to assist in surveying dark matter emissions within the system. None that I visited coincided with the presence of Maya Sundaresh or her collective. The final set of coordinates led off into empty space. The dark matter emissions at the outer edge of the system seem to move in a path, a trail, a ribbon of energy. I have alerted Ikora, who agrees that this warrants further inquiry. She is currently, and I'm sure non-coincidentally, investigating similar radiation in the trans-Neptunian belt. I have followed this ribbon of energy, signature keys to the time dilation surrounding, but to no avail, lead you toward space. We skip forward in time a bit for this page, though still following Eris. She has left Europa in search of assistance from someone who understands the Vex more, as her expertise is with the Hive and subsequently the Taken, as much as anyone can know anything about them. She had traveled to Nessus, hoping to glean what she could from Osiris, but was surprised when she landed and it was Failsafe that had sent for her. In fact, Failsafe had recognized her signal immediately and sent an invitation for tea. Honestly, I do think she landed with a better advisor here. While I love Osiris and think he has made a lot of personal growth, at some very unfortunate expense. And Osiris may be more direct and serious when it comes to the threat of the Vex. Failsafe is decidedly less full of herself, and, historically, more open to creative suggestions. Not to mention, she has a golden age computational core to gnaw on the data Eris brought her. So there's that. To keep Eris entertained in the meantime, Failsafe actually provided a list of native plants that could be used to make a tea blend and sends her off. Osiris would have probably guilted Eris into sorting his library stacks or something while she waited. As Failsafe finishes their analysis, it's revealed that indeed the corruption is a physical manifestation, not a digital one. Further analysis shows that different parts of the Minotaur were aged differently, though seemingly manufactured at the same time. Same as what had happened to her ship. Continued observation of the Vex on Nessus reveal even more oddities. The Vex are notorious for being cold, calculating beings of logic. But time and again, she sees signs of individualism. Wandering patrols with no destination, a singular frame observing a bug on the ground. Or, in the more extreme, a group of frames twisted, bent, forced into the ground, drained of radiolaria. Eris surmises this had to be a punishment of sorts. Vex don't leave resources like this. They would have reabsorbed the frames or sent them on to another task. What need is there for punishment in a pure hive mind structure like the Vex? Eris takes this evidence to suggest that the conductor's control over the Coral Vex may be slipping. Whether the Echo of Control is somehow losing its grip over the Vex, or Maya herself is losing her grip on the Echo, it's clear a power dynamic is shifting. Whatever Maya did to bind herself to the Echo, the toll seems to be mounting. Eris likens the system-wide erratic behavior of the Vex to a scientist changing the parameters of the experiment to match their original thesis. Given Maya's history, as a scientist, I have to imagine this is nothing short of a blatant insult directed at what Maya has let herself become. The last bit of analysis gets a bit more technical, though I feel it's no less important to the story. Try not to let your eyes gloss over too much, though. We're on the topic for a good time, not a long time. We're jumping into the study of spectral analysis of black holes, emissions, and their radiation. According to a very dense research paper from Monthly Notices of Royal Astronomical Society that I had a very hard time understanding even the abstract from, it would seem that this would suggest the Minotaur had come in contact with a black hole, or at least the radiation that characteristically surrounds a black hole. If you understand this subject and would like to be an intermediary for my understanding of this paper, I would be grateful. It truly does seem interesting. In the world of destiny, black holes mean many things to lots of different interested parties. But in regards to the Vex, They may be attempting to use the extreme physics of a black hole to alter their existing time manipulation in some fashion. If it has to do with possible Taken research, Maya could be attempting to use the Vex frames as probing tools to see what answers may lie beyond the reaches of the event horizon. With our current 2025 understanding of physics, black holes are the most powerful source of time distortions, without any space magic mumbo-jumbo. But given that the data contained within that Vex monitor is capable of inflicting temporal corruptions, there's simply no telling what effects they could have when combined. Combing the system for similar dark matter emissions leads to numerous leads and one trail off into empty space. Unfortunately, each of these leads ends in a dead end, but the trail off into space holds some surprising clues. Less of a trail and more of an actual well-trodden path, there is a significant signature of these dark matter emissions. Eris reports it to Ikora, who agrees it's significant and worth pursuing. As a note of trivia, Ikora is reported to be investigating in the Trans-Neptunian Belt. This area includes objects like Pluto, Haumea, and Eris. And here is where we finally get to the blatantly interesting portion of the book. The final message suffers from corruption and the insertion of binary code, a hint that perhaps there is more to the corruption than what they thought they contained. The first piece is the 111, hinting at the number 3. We can be fairly sure of this from what follows. The repeating block of binary are code for the number 1, and it repeats 3 times in each block. There doesn't seem to be anything hidden in the random capitalized letters and replaced numbers. I4E3TIS, or IAEETIS, or conversely, 1433715. For now, there seems to be no clues behind it. The only connections I find behind it are, admittedly, pretty weak. It's mildly interesting that all the capitalized letters can be translated to leet speak. And also, that of 3 and 4 being the only numbers represented, connected to the block of binary for the 111 repeating a total of 4 times. Complete spin foil here, but this is the best I got. Perhaps that's why the next page takes us to Mars. Has anyone asked 4 what they were doing when 3 was originally murdered? Spinfoil theory, Guardians. Complete spinfoil theory. The remaining uncorrupted text reads, Ribbon of energy. Signature keys to the time dilation surrounding, but to no avail. Lead you toward space.
Comrade level encrypted message follows.
Naturally, the Praxic Order is concerned with the proliferation of reality-altering technology. But the Order's mandate is not the protection of the city, or even humanity. It's to combat the agents of darkness. Until the Vex fall within those parameters, the Order respectfully declines. Sorry, Ikora. I tried. Normally, I wouldn't get out of bed to track Cabal activity, but the Hidden are reporting a new sect at work on Mars. Their livery and weapons are fresh, and they're doing brisk trade with the local gangs. Not within our purview, I know, but it bears watching. According to Omar St. Croix, this new faction of Cabal are big players in the Martians' arm trade. They have guns and armor for sale beyond the usual refurbished Red Legion junk. Someone out there with real manufacturing clout is behind them. To what end, I'm not sure yet. I know the Martian Cabal isn't a sanctioned target, but mark my words, it's only a matter of time. Nobody stockpiles this much gear without hedging against Guardian interference. They'll want pyrocausal weapons sooner or later, and by the time we see them in the field, it'll be too late. I told you it was only a matter of time before this new Cabal faction went after pyrocausal weapons, and here we are. A hit squad wearing their livery mugged Zur in the Winding Cove. Cased him until all the Guardians left, then gave him the old Dark Age sticker. Here's the inventory of everything stolen from Zur.
1.
Bad juju.
1.
Malfeasance.
1.
Ruinous effigy.
1.
Flight records. Left all the strange coins, glimmer, and standard gear. Clearly knew what they were after. This won't be their last attempt to secure advanced weaponry. After reviewing the Zur case file, something sticks out. The flight data. They didn't just want the weapons. They wanted to know where he got them. They wanted his contacts. Looking back, that might have been the real target of all along. Looks like I was right about the flight records being the real target of Zur's stick-up. Intercepted comms from an unidentified Cabal ship included references, Zur's Dominion and Eternity. The message repeats 9 times. Somebody's trying to make contact. I think the renegade Cabal are making headway. Our undercovers on Mars report their lieutenants out trading for samples of periodic elements, most of them benign. Tungsten, iodine, ytterbium, neodymium, the list goes on. And not in quantities useful for manufacturing either. Something's up. I put out feelers with the fallen mob in Tharsis. Rumor is the Cabal have their Scion engineers building a cipher device using periodic elements as its key. Not the words for the elements, but the elements themselves. They have to be getting outside help. And I mean way outside. The hidden listening post on Mars reports a spike in local comms traffic. Whatever the Cabal were hoping to gain from Zur's flight records in their elemental cipher, it seems to have worked. We still don't know who's backing the Martian faction, but they've got big plans. Our agents have been making indirect inquiries to the other gangs in Tharsis. Word is, the Cabal are looking for the Drifter, and more specifically, the Derelict. I get the feeling Drifter stepped in something rancid, and he's about to track it all over our carpet. Where is that scumbag? We've left Eris, taking up a whole new location and viewpoint. We're reading one side of a correspondence between Ikora Rey and someone who we can presume is Honor, due to some comments made towards the end that we'll cover later. It seems Ikora has asked Honor to petition the Praxic Order to direct their resources to obstructing the new Vex activities taking place. While Honor admits she sides with Ikora and her instincts, the Praxic Order is, unsurprisingly, very strict about adhering to their tenets of defending against the agents of darkness, and that alone. Our next missive informs us of a hunch she's following out to Mars. So far, it's only a small upstart group of Cabal selling weapons, but they seem too freshly stocked and agile for a bunch of average miscreants. So she's off to keep watch. Only a couple messages later, and her tone has taken on a much more serious and cautious wording. She warns that they're not just distributing, but also stockpiling, to an extreme level. They're anticipating something big, and few things that big don't involve Guardians. It's only a matter of time till this group starts looking for paracausal weapons to better address that element. Sure enough, the 3 weapons listed are not just paracausal weapons. They are weapons all described at some point as being hungry or devouring light. They aren't the only ones, mind you, but it's a hard to ignore commonality. Since all the other traditional valuables were left untouched at the scene, it seems the assumption they are after paracausal weapons was correct after all. Not only the weapons, the flight records being stolen as well indicates they were also valuable, leading Honor to suspect they are after the source of these weapons, even more than just a handful. Those familiar with the lore should have alarm bells ringing at this point. But for those still confused, it's no coincidence that Xur's masters are the Nine, and this rogue group has retraced his flight path while broadcasting their message 9 times. There have been plenty of false references to the Nine in Destiny's history, but I don't think this is one of them. Back to our elements for a moment. In my very limited scope of research, it seems the elements listed here are all formed in old or young massive stars that get triggered supernova, indicating that these elements require more time or complex situations. In previous attempts of communication at the Cocytus Gates, someone or something on the other side began sending through constructs. It started out with basic elements, eventually moving up to failed attempts at life forms. It could be possible that they deduced that passing elements was much more reliable than passing elaborate mechanisms. The English alphabet is made up of 26 letters and numbers 0 through 9. Using the table of elements, as we understand it so far, for the building blocks of your language would presumably open up communication to much more advanced ideas. The idea that they are using elements that are made in older or massively condensing stars indicates even further that their methods have become more refined. It does seem that Honor is finally putting the pieces together, even if she doesn't outright state it here in her official communique. Not being one to mince words, Honor's use of the spelling way can be seen as to indicate that there is much more than face value to her words. Using the elements not as their title, but as an actual key for the cipher, means this is exponentially more complex than simple telegrams. To what extent, I'm simply not sure. Perhaps the atomic structure of the elements acts as the key, maybe a decay rate. One thing's for certain, I'm out of my element. Being a member of both the Praxic Order and the Hidden, Honor is tapped into the two largest exo-vanguard groups, one as a para-police force and the other as a vast spy network. The idea that she is operating largely blind indicates that the city at large is operationally blind to something on this scale, despite exponentially growing in threat level. This is where we get our most damning clue that the author here is Honor. The tonality behind all these messages has been largely professional, if occasionally betraying concern. However, once the Drifter is mentioned, the author drops into a more casual and pejorative tone. While the Vex or the weapons gang on Mars may not be in her jurisdiction, Drifter is a guardian of the tower, and as such, the Praxic Order considers him amongst their concern. Honor is a force of holy Praxic fire, backed by righteous indignation, and Honor Mahal has her attention on the Drifter once more.
She understood me in a way he never could. Having to make it alone after Brian. She was vibrant, tough, a real badass, breathing life into his lifeless existence. And now, she's gone, and he's not far behind. He's shirking again, heading for the edge of the system like there's something out there. It's pathetic. Old as a sequoia and still running away from home like a little kid. What a waste. In a strange way, I sympathize. If I could leave this gutless creep behind, I'd already be gone. Something told me to compile. Intuition, maybe. My first time in years. I was surprised how heavy my shell felt. He never saw me, but I was watching as something passed over the ship. Or maybe we passed through it. And for a few minutes, I felt fresh, bright, hopeful. Like in the beginning, before him. He's gray now, aged decades and seconds. Hasn't said a word about it, but it's not like I want to hear his crap anyway. Wonder if the anomaly aged me too. Is my core all roomy and dim now, like an old lady's eyeball? Not that it matters. Old or young, eternity is just as long. Try not to think about how much I gave up for him. My voice, my agency. Not for myself, but for him too. So both of us could survive. If only I'd known. And she's back. Just like that. Even without a ghost. Funny how death works. Finally, a little gleam of justice. If anyone deserved it, it's her. He looks happy. Maybe even thinks he is. But I know him better than that. He's just relieved she saved him from himself. Again. This business in the Orc Cloud. He's playing with forces he can't hope to understand. Like a kid waving a stick of dynamite. If he thinks he can get through this without me, he's fooling himself. His specialty.
Zero 1 1 0 0 0 1 0 0 1 1 0 1 1 0 0 0 1 1 1 0 1 0 1 0 1 1 0 0 1 0 1 translates to blue. Blue turns up 372 hits on Ishtar Collective. Only 8 mentions in Edge of Fate, 6 are repeats on different helms, and 2 weapons. All seem arbitrary mentions of the color blue, 2 referring to the blue of Earth, and the other referring to the energy collecting inside the weapon. Zavala is called Big Blue by Cade. There was a distinct blue infection during the Siva crisis. Already grasping at straws, but that's the best I got. The only other hint this code might supply us with is that it is a 4-letter word, and in the previous corruption involving binary, the only letters swapped for numbers were the numbers 3 and 4. We can presume why the 3 may be significant, with the fate of 3 being a significant story element. But with 4, other than the number of letters in blue, I'm again forced to say I just don't know. So, for the first time ever, we get to see from the perspective of Drifter's ghost. We had heard it talk before and express its own will before, during Drifter's journals, but never as the narrator's voice itself. We're given context to the timing by what's discussed, and it seems to be shortly after Eris's death. It seems Drifter wasn't the only one who had grown attached to Eris. The ghost expresses a true appreciation for who she was, and the effect she had on those fortunate enough to be close to her. For as much as the ghost had true affection for Eris, we feel the same weight of disdain expressed for their guardian, Drifter. The ghost looks down on Wu Ming, deriding their reaction to Eris's death as immature and selfish. Though, as much as they look down on Germaine, the ghost expresses a macabre sense of empathy for their actions. If the ghost was able to abandon the man with no name, they would. It's revealed here that the ghost doesn't just stay hidden away when others are around. They haven't even physically compiled in years. Even the ghost doesn't seem entirely positive of what exactly they are passing through. But given the proximity to the corpse of 3 and the wash of energy we can see during the cutscene, the positivity they feel wash over them, reminiscent of the early times, and it's possible they are entering a field where the normal laws of our dimensions aren't strictly applied. Whether the proximity to a 4th-dimensional corpse interacting with the hull and temporarily reanimating it, allows the paracausal influences of the traveler to behave as unattended, or conversely, temporarily lifts the burden of the connection to the traveler's influence between itself, drifter, and the ghost. Perhaps this is why it felt compelled to manifest itself physically. Something was telling it to experience this wash of field effect, whatever it may have truly been. After the event is done and past, nothing changes between the two. Each seems to be undeniably changed, with the ghost more mentally than physically. As they lament, old or young, eternity is just as long. As much as the ghost tries to claim they ignore the past when possible, we can see from the vitriol and weight of previous comments that this simply isn't true. They detest Drifter on a very core level. We still have no confirmation of just what it was the Drifter and the ghost did to modify it in such a way, but we do get confirmation that the ghost really did give up its ability to talk. And we also learned that it feels it also lost its agency, though what exactly it means by that it doesn't clarify. We have seen in the case of Rezalazir that a ghost can choose to leave its guardian if pushed far enough. Something Drifter tells us was even more common back in the early days of the Dark Ages. So what does it mean when a ghost who so clearly despises their guardian and openly admits they wish they had left them states that they gave up my agency? Again, we see just how much the ghost respects Eris. Not only are they grateful that she's been miraculously returned, they state that she deserves to have skipped death. Even as Drifter's face begins to lift, the ghost denies accepting even this, convinced that any happiness this man feels is just a mask. Despite an entire page of negativity, any reference to their charge being tainted with contempt, they express a sense that the Drifter still needs the ghost for the challenges coming ahead. Conclusion. We have examples of Vex acting in an unusual manner, exhibiting potential signs of interactions with black holes. Weapons brokers turned stockpilers have set their sights on paracausal weapons and a potential source for them. Finally, we see a glimpse of Drifter caught in the throes of temporal waves for a brief moment, and even gain new insight to a very old character's thoughts. However, I can't close out a discussion of this book without making mention of Eris one last time. During Eris's downtime while Failsafe did their research, she managed to cultivate a new tea blend of Nessian herbs. Not only is it relaxing, but apparently it also wields a property much like Szechuan peppercorns, where it provides a localized numbing sensation. It is unequivocally charming and adorable to see two individuals over a handful of centuries old, having lived lives haunted by torment of numerous variety, now preparing a custom blend of tea with the express intent of sharing it together. Hope takes many forms. Thanks for hanging out. Have a good one.